Tennis. Yes, tennis is the biggest enemy of China at the moment. You wouldn't believe it, but tennis has just messed up China. 6 love. Remember the old days when we used to watch TV like this? Remember the wallets we used to lug around? Are you still carrying around the same style of wallet? If so, it's probably time you upgraded your wallet to something slick, modern, and stylish. Also, stop watching reruns of The Golden Girls and Murder, She Wrote. Get with the times and get an extra wallet. Still the only wallet that's actually changed my life. Well, specifically the part where I pay for things. Right now there's a site-wide sale over at Exeter, and don't forget you'll get an additional discount if you go to shop.exeter.com/SerpentZA. Use the code SerpentZA at checkout to get a fantastic discount on this brilliant wallet. Head on over and grab yourself the most badass wallet in the world. Absolutely everybody I know who has an Exeter wallet completely loves them, including my wife. Anyway, head on over to shop.exeter.com/SerpentZA and go grab yourself one. You won't regret it. And now back to the show. So, sports, as it turns out, are a valuable weapon when it comes to international diplomacy.
Good evening. The Soviet Union will not be taking part in the 1984 Olympic Games to be held in Los Angeles. The Soviet Union accuses the United States of using the Games for political purposes. They say they are guilty of stirring up anti-Soviet propaganda.
When it comes to your image overseas and when it comes to negotiating with other countries. I mean, just look at how the Olympics runs and all the different countries vying for their chance to be in the spotlight and host the Olympics. Look at all these big World Cups that are held all over the world. It means so much to certain countries to be able to host and, of course, win World Cups or sporting tournaments. And we've seen all of the big sporting organizations capitulate to the CCP, to China. I'm not just talking about the NBA, which is the biggest offender when it comes to bowing down to the CCP.
羊年贺岁 Happy Chinese New Year from the NBA.
But other big organizations like the PGA, football associations, you name it, because there's so much money being thrown at sports in China, because it's so important to China, that sporting organizations the world over are more than ready to bend over for Big Daddy Xi Jinping. But there is one small, plucky, yet strong area of sport that's fighting back, and it's women's tennis. Now, a few days ago, on a tennis court in Belgrade, Serbia, a father was filmed brutally beating his 14-year-old daughter because she refused to practice tennis, or she was going against his orders or his demands, something along those lines. Turns out it was a Chinese father beating his Chinese daughter in public. And it was filmed, and there was a lot of outrage. And the good news is that the father was arrested. Now, usually this kind of news will slip by and disappear and be buried, especially if this kind of thing happened in China, it wouldn't make the news. But normally this kind of thing would just not be a big thing. But the tennis community stood up. The tennis community, tennis stars from around the world spoke up about this and were appalled and demanded action and cast a very unwelcome spotlight on a certain aspect of Chinese society, which has to change. You see, as disgusting and condemnable the actions of this father were, in China, it's actually accepted socially. I've seen it with my own eyes. And even when he was brought before a judge, this is what he had to say in his defense. And I'm going to quote from the Serbian news outlet Mondo. He justified his actions by saying that his daughter refused to continue training on a critical day, and that is why he wanted her to return to the field. He pointed out that it was not his intention to hurt her, but it is tradition in China to respect hierarchy, and he believes that he did the right thing because it is allowed in China. And that's the most important thing to take away from this, is the fact that he beat her savagely. If you want to go find the clip, you can. I'm not going to show it here because I don't want my video age restricted. But he beat her savagely, and his defense was, it's okay because I'm allowed to do that in China. Now, a lot of people might stand up and say, that's not right, that's not true, you can't do that in China. But I myself have seen this kind of behavior in public a lot. Domestic violence is seen as a personal, private matter, and the police very rarely intervene. So when you have a big scuffle on the streets, if you see somebody, it could be the husband or the wife, beating up their respective spouse, nobody intervenes, no one steps in. And the police certainly won't step in. The only time the police ever get involved is if it gets super, super crazy, and they just act as a mediator. They'll sit the two down, they'll sit the couple down, and they'll be like, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to make this right? But they don't press charges. There is no sort of criminal law against this sort of thing because it's seen as a private matter. This happened a couple of years ago in New York with a Chinese couple who got into a scuffle on the streets, and the husband was beating the wife, and bystanders actually called the cops, and he was arrested, and both of them were shocked, saying like, why is he arrested? The wife was like, I don't want him to be arrested, this is normal. It's just because it is a societal norm in China to not get involved in people's domestic affairs, and domestic affairs can mean brutally beating your 14-year-old daughter and kicking her when she's down on the ground. So you see how tennis is standing up here. And this is not the first time tennis has stood up. Do you remember the whole Peng Shuai scenario? She accused a high-ranking CCP official of sexual abuse and then was disappeared. Well, when people started to ask what happened to her, who stepped in? Not the Olympics Committee. In fact, because they were busy in the process of the whole Winter Olympics thing in China, they actually defended her disappearance. They tried to help hush it up. They tried to cover it up. It was actually quite disgusting what the Olympics Committee did. But you know who stood up? Was the women's tennis organization. You know, that's the thing. Tennis, it seems, really does have the balls to stand up to China. Now, while tennis is willing to stand up for the rights of women in China and the daughters of China, there are insidious people out there who are trying their absolute best to make sure that the lives of the women and children who are victims of domestic abuse never improve. And these are the whataboutism peddlers. When I shared the news of this terrible beating on Twitter, I got a slew of people trying to show me statistics of child abuse in other countries, in Africa or America. Of course, starts with America, trying to say that America's like so bad when it comes to child abuse. And one has to ask why. Why is it that people want to do this? Why, if you show them something that's right in front of their face as being a problem that needs to be addressed and fixed, and specifically a Chinese problem because it's culturally and socially acceptable to, well, carry out domestic abuse in China, and people will leave you alone. So why would they suddenly start to show you statistics of child abuse in America, for instance, or in other parts of the world? What purpose does it serve? It's certainly not helping fix the problem in China. It's certainly not helping the poor girl or the poor mother or the poor wife or whoever it is that's currently being abused. And I've talked about this at length. I've got many videos talking about the plight of women in China if you'd like to go and see more. But what is the purpose of this whataboutism? All it does is to serve as an excuse for these terrible things to happen in China. It's there to deflect away from this very real problem that needs to be addressed. It doesn't matter if there's domestic abuse elsewhere. That doesn't change the fact that there's domestic abuse in China. That doesn't change the fact that it's a big problem that needs to be addressed. You can give examples of crap all over the world. What does that change the domestic abuse situation in China? It changes nothing. All it does is guarantee that it will continue to be bad and continue to get worse. So for the rather immoral, cowardly, horrible people who try their best to deflect away from the very real problems China faces, to you I say, pick up tennis. Maybe then, for once, you'd actually have some balls. Anyway, until next time, guys, you know the drill. As always, stay awesome.
因为我的脚趾。我姓港，又姓。我那个。我